that we've got. The basic idea of this budget is actually spend. That's what the finance minister has actually been stating over and over again, the importance of spending, and therefore fiscal deficit has been pegged at 9.5%, well over what it was the last time around. But the idea is that they need to spend to try and get the economy out of the problems that we've had. Well, joining us now, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, the president of NAREDCO. I'm also joined by Amrish Shah, partner of Deloitte India, and Rajiv Dimri, the national head of tax at KPMG in India. We'll be joined by other panelists as well, but let's just try and take in our questions. Let's bring in the first question that we have. Let's bring in that plaque so that we can actually direct a question. So plaque number 1. What are the major changes in the healthcare sector? Dr. Hiranandani, would you like to take that? The major changes in the healthcare sector, how is that a real focus?
It's a very important focus. I think COVID has really woken us up that the healthcare sector has been neglected. And a huge focus is there on public sector healthcare, both at the primary and secondary level. And of course, because of the vaccine. My issue is slightly different. I think what you must understand is if you have a serious person who is a politician or who's a bureaucrat, he doesn't go to a government hospital to get treated for his COVID situation. He goes to a private hospital, and I'm talking about 9 times out of 10, the people do so. So what really needed to be done over and above what has been done by the finance minister is also further incentivize investments in the private healthcare sector. I think that is also equally important because both the sectors together can only take care of the entire sector. But great, I mean, it had to be done. I'm really happy that the amount is being done. And of course, we must roll out the vaccine as quickly as possible, because the earlier we do it, the better it is. So I'm tremendously happy about it, but not happy about the fact that the private healthcare sector and research in the private healthcare sector on the issues of whatever healthcare sectors which is having a problem with, we need to address it jointly.
Absolutely. We're also joined by Jayant Krishna of UKIBC at this time, and Sanjay Tolia of PwC India. Mr. Krishna, let me come to you, and if you can just take the second question. It's actually related to the first one, but there's a lot of popular interest in these questions. Is 35,000 crore enough to vaccinate India's population?
So, what the government has not clarified that, this will cover how many people, because all that we have the clarity of right now that the first 3 crore people, which comprises 1 crore of healthcare professionals and 2 crores of law and order and police machinery, they will be covered free of cost. But rest of it, how will it happen? So I don't really know, and what percentage of the population would be covered there. But overall basis, if you look at healthcare, they have enhanced the outlay by about 130 plus percent. Which is in a way encouraging, because we as a country, we spend just about 1.3% of our GDP on healthcare, which is among the lowest among the countries of a certain league. So I think that is very that's encouraging, because the Prime Minister had said it even before the pandemic that this has to go up to about 3%. If we have to make any sense of our public healthcare infrastructure. So I think this far, but clearly there is a long way to go, because the health delivery systems and especially for poorest of the poor people that we have, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. On one hand, we talk about medical tourism, the corporate hospitals. On the other hand, it's the other extreme.
Okay. Rajiv Dimri, let me ask you this. It's a question which a lot of people have been messaging us. Will Provident Fund now be taxed? It is being taxed. So how does that work?
Limits on that, because it is meant to serve a particular purpose of a certain level, and if people are using it as a normal saving mechanism, obviously that has been under discussion. So the clarification is above a certain level. That's where it is, but not the core and the basic Provident Fund. That's not meant to be taxed.
At what rate, Mr. Dimri, is this being taxed, and what is the threshold beyond which you will be taxed?
Well, I don't have those details, but that's something that I need to look at. I focus more on the indirect taxes, as you are aware.
And if we look at the indirect taxes this time around, there's not been a lot of mention in the speech per se. What in your mind are some of the main points that you've gone through in the fine text?
So there are a few noteworthy, while in the speech a lot of tariff movements were talked about, but there are some real ones. So one, which I'm sure the entire taxpaying community will welcome. In GST, they were obliged to file an audited reconciliation state by state. It was adding a huge amount of cost to the taxpayers and required a huge amount of effort to go in on an annual basis. And that requirement has been done away with. I know for a fact that this was a major demand of the taxpaying community, and that would be a major relief. That's one part. The second, wrong or right, is that every customs notification will, most of the customs notification will now have a built-in shelf life of only 2 years. Okay. So from the time they are issued, they'll be off within a 2-year period. Now that certainly gives clarity as to what's current, but it will be a difficulty for people who are relying on a long-term project based on customs notification, because if you know that this is only good for 2 years, unless it is renewed, so that will come in the way of large projects which are relying on certain customs exemption. That's the second part noteworthy. Third, and a very important one, is that every customs investigation, any action by the department, has to be completed within a 2-year period, with a potential extension by 1 more year. But these are really interesting ones that I wanted to highlight here.
Okay. Mr. Tole, I just wanted to get back to this particular question on Provident Fund being taxed. Would you have any detail to share on this? Why is this being done? A lot of people have been asking.
Okay. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Perfect. So Vishnu, I think, let me clarify. So today what happens is that when an employer contributes to the Provident Fund, and also the employee contributes to the Provident Fund, and based on the threshold, the investment is allowed as an exemption, okay, as a deduction for computing tax. Now, all the interest which was coming through from the Provident Fund on this balance, which is employers' funds, employers' contribution, and employees' contribution, was exempt from tax. What has happened now is that the new provision which has been announced says that when an employee contributes to the Provident Fund and that contribution exceeding 2,50,000, interest on that excess contribution will not be eligible for tax exemption. So let me make it simple. If you contribute 5 lakhs as an employee, the interest on 2,50,000 will not be exempt going forward. So that is the new law.
And an affiliated question, at what percentage would the balance be taxed?
So it will become income from other sources. So you just have to add it to your total income, and then you will apply the slabs, the normal slabs.
And would you agree, sir, that, for so many professionals across this country, not just professionals, because Provident Fund affects, people in every part of the workforce, this is a major concern that, a lot of people in the middle class would certainly have reached that threshold beyond which they were expecting that to be untouched when you're planning your retirement. So would this not constitute a pretty serious setback?
It will. You're right, Vishnu. But I think this is something. If you remember, the government had announced many years back that they would want to go to the scheme of EET. So we had the scheme of exempt. So when you contribute, it's exempt. When you are in the scheme, it is exempt. And when you withdraw from the scheme, it is exempt. I think the government is slowly moving towards that EET, where they've started with a very small step that, okay, when you contribute, no problem. But when you get some income out of it, I want to tax a little portion of it. And yes, it will have some burden, but probably I think when the government decided that we will not touch the corporate tax rate or we will not touch the personal tax rates, they found probably a way to get some income out of it.
I suppose I'll have to work for many more years. I think that's what I was trying to ask you. Dr. Hiranandani had a question. Dr. Hiranand had a point to make. Go ahead, sir.
in India, we don't have social security of the kind which we have in the Western countries. And I think Provident Fund was an important resource which was not taxable. And we were all saving, all the professionals were saving under this Provident Fund issues, which could not be touched either by litigation or any other matter. And I think we should, as industry, represent to government that this should not be done. Because it's people as hard-earned money and people at different levels of professional life do need this kind of money and savings to be done. In India, we don't have a retirement benefits, which the government, even if you're a high tax-paying person, you don't get anything post-retirement or when you stop earning. And I think we in the industry are definitely going to represent on this issue. And I am hopeful that other people will too.
That's very important, Dr. Hiranandani. Have you discussed this with others in, for example, some of the other industry bodies? Is there consensus that this is something which, you know, industry leaders like yourself will go to the finance minister and say, please, let's revise this?
I haven't yet talked to the other industry, but in ASSOCHAM, we have had an informal talk this afternoon, and we are certainly taking up this issue. I will talk to the other industrial leaders in terms of various associations in a day or two and send out a representation on this account.
That's really important to hear. Thank you, sir. Mr. Shah, another question which has also come up. Why is the reduction in time limit for reopening of tax assessment important? Mr. Amrish Shah, would you like to take that? All right, I think we've got a problem on the line with him. Who'd like to take that? Mr. Tolia, would you like to take that?
I can take it. Vishnu, if I may come in here on that point, if you don't mind.
So clearly, if you look at one of the objective from a government standpoint is to bring tax certainty, and the other point is to bring tax certainty as early as possible. So we have these provisions around advance ruling, advance pricing agreements. So that is where the government is pushing very, very hard. You also saw that the announcements were there around dispute resolution committee to be formed for addressing small taxpayers. The third one is how do we get into faceless assessments, faceless appeals, and it has also now got extended to tribunals. In the same spirit, when you look at reopening, the powers to the tax authorities was that they could reopen all the way up to 6 years whenever they found that income had escaped assessment. Now, if you look at 6 years, it's quite a long time. So trying to bring certainty in a shorter period, the law has been changed to say, hey, why don't we try and get this reduced to 3 years? If a tax authority has to make a position that there is income escape assessment, they just have 3 years to take that position. Beyond that, you cannot touch the taxpayer, which means that beyond 3 years, if you have got your rulings, if you have got your income tax returns cleared, you are comfortable with certainty that there is no other provision in the law which can reopen the cases and start all over again. And I think this is in that spirit.
It's an important move with transparency. Absolutely.
Very, very important move.
Yep.
And very, very interesting move.
It is interesting. I don't think anybody expected this. Let's bring up the next question. This is actually who is proposed, who benefits from the agriculture infrastructure and development cess? Mr. Dimri, would you care to take that? The benefits of the agriculture infrastructure and development cess.
So if you see, it has been applied to, identified about 25 different products, and wherever it's been applied, there has been a corresponding reduction in the customs duty. So on the face of it, as on today, whenever it gets applied, it was not going to impact the actual final duty. But the way the tax will get applied is that instead of customs duty, that will be replaced with this cess, and cess, as you are aware, is a tax for a specific purpose. Some people are saying that is this a way of central government keeping taxes and not sharing with the state, because the custom duties under normal circumstances get shared with the states, and therefore this gets recharacterized as a cess. and doesn't get shared with the states, although it will be applied for a specific purpose, which by definition all cesses are. And as I understand, that to the extent states are going to participate in that program, that money will be shared with the state. There were some doubts about, whether there was a WTO pressure as well on this, that duties being high. So effectively today, it does not impact the net duty that gets paid, although it does set a basis that if the rates were to change going forward, it could have a different effect. But today it's applied only for 25 select items, which is where it is. So it's, in a sense, to my mind, a start of a pilot, depending on how the money gets collected and how the response happens. This might get expanded in future, but today it has a minimal effect.
Okay, let's go to the next question. Thanks, sir, for explaining that cess, how exactly it works. So the finance minister said the compliance burden on senior citizens will be reduced. How will this happen? Mr. Krishna, do you want to take that? Mr. Krishna, I think you've hit mute. Have you hit mute by yeah, much better.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
beyond a certain threshold of age, I think 75 years is what she said. People would be exempt, and as long as the source of income is only through the pension or the interest income, they'll be exempt from filing returns. So that's one. But I mean, if you look at the plight of old people today with the interest rates falling, and now what I hear is the part of the PF also getting taxed. So their plight is only going to be increased. I mean, even their sustenance and survival, these issues are challenged today. Because they had made certain savings. Government people are okay because government people, most of them still get the pension, and the pension is also indexed with inflation, and therefore they get a DA on the top of the pension. So I think their lives are not that miserable. But the private sector people without any retirement benefits or any superannuation funds, I think things are, so this is just a not filing the income tax return beyond 75 is a very, very small relief. But what is important is that somebody has to think about their sustenance and their livelihood, all their life savings that they have put in some investments. It's not good enough for them to sustain themselves today. The return on their investments is so inadequate and so low. I think that's a bigger question to me rather than this very, very small marginal relief of exempting them from filing returns.
Okay, we've got a caller with a question. Mr. Rajinder Singh from Ambala. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Rajinder Singh. I'm 76 years old. My question is, I'm receiving income from pension as well as from the investment from other sources like FDs and post office investment. Whether I have to pay any tax?
The very basic question. Who'd like to take that, Mr. Dimri? Would you like to take that? He's 76 years old. He's calling in from Ambala. He has pension. He's got earnings through fixed deposit and a postal office scheme as well. Will he now have to pay taxes, additional taxes?
So, I'm assuming that even today, the money that he receives is after due taxes being deducted by the institutions that pay him, whether it's the pensions or the banks. So this relief that is being talked about is only from the aspect of having to report income in a return. It's not a tax exemption being given. It is only a change of compliance requirement. So all the payments that he would be receiving, if they are liable to tax, those respective institutions would be withholding taxes. Those reports anyway get submitted to the government. And therefore, this is not about tax exemption. No exemption has been announced in this budget. It's a relief from having to file a return.
Relief from having to file a return. Okay. Pramanik from Pune, go ahead with your question.
This question is to the panelists. I think the issue of social security was discussed. And you have the situation that...
Yes, go ahead.
That on one side you have inflation going up, the COVID situation, the interest rates which are falling, and you have the Varisht Bima Yojana, which was initially announced to give an interest of 9%, which is now down to 7%. Now, by saying that 75 years plus you don't have to file returns, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
The people don't have income.
I think that's such a key question. Dr. Hiranandani, your comments on that.
Social security.
Social security is what this gentleman is speaking about. He referred to the Vashisht Bima Yojana. He says, however, returns in this scheme and in other schemes have been coming down. So for senior citizens, have we really done anything substantial?
Answer is no. So the short answer is that this budget hasn't done anything more than what our friend just mentioned, which is it has help them not to file the returns under certain conditions, and certain conditions are pretty narrow. Even if he got the smallest of income from other sources, then he would have to file the return. So only if there are two parts of the method by which you get income, then and only then this non-filing is applicable. Second part of it is very important. I think the idea of social security needs to be enhanced over a period of time, and some sort of understanding to be able to leverage it with inflation. So it's not about the interest rates alone, but the inflation in the general economy that we need to protect. And for people who are generally elder people should have a saving mechanism which should be inflationary linked. If the government servants who retire are able to get a pension linked to inflationary index, I think people who would have been put savings into a particular account should also have it at an inflationary index. And I think that becomes very important on social security. Housing is a very big, important social security, which I believe people must have during their younger ages, because in India, there is no shelter available in your old age unless you have bought a house. So that's one part of the story. The second is the saving part. With the reduction in interest rates, I think government needs to now think about some sort of savings for people who are elderly and are getting monies in lump sum from Provident Fund or other things in order to see that they are protected. I totally agree that this Provident Fund being partly taxed is actually wrong in view of the fact of inflation and the difficulties that we are now facing under, especially when you come across health problems which are very expensive today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, sir, for offering that comment in response to that question. I need to take a short break. We'll come back with a lot more. This is a program where we are trying to answer basic questions which have been sent in to us by our viewers who are also calling in. Back with a lot more. Stay tuned.